The vagina coach. Vagina, 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 vagina. Let's say vagina. Why is this still shocking to us?
It's less shocking now than it used to be, but I am also still shocked that I still hear people every single day that have never heard of this, have been suffering, have been dismissed by care providers, are ashamed to talk about it. There's a lot of nuance with pelvic floor.
Your pelvic health would absolutely factor in to you trying to show up and doing all the things that you need to do and trying to move the dial on the scale.
The pelvic floor is the foundation of our core. When it's not working optimally, all the other things we do are not going to be done as effectively.
Why do you think we've come to accept this as just it's normal and it's just kind of how it is?
We are constantly fed messages that it's normal. That's what happens as you age. What did you expect after you have babies? That's just what happens because you're now post-menopause. These problems are happening much earlier in life, even to people who've never been pregnant. We need to train our whole body and our pelvic floor. To me, it's one of the greatest obstacles for our longevity. It's what halts us from doing so many things that help us age well and age powerfully.
This is the Weigh In with Gina podcast. So, Kim, you're known as the vagina coach. You have a podcast called Between Two Lips. You are the creator of the Buff Muff Method. You're also the founder of Kegels and Cocktails. All very shocking. Why are we still why is this still shocking to us? You think?
That's a really good. I mean, it's less shocking now than it used to be. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and so I have definitely seen a trend in the right direction. But I am also still shocked the fact that I've been doing this for over 20 years that I still hear people every single day that have never heard of this, have been suffering, have been dismissed by care providers, are ashamed to talk about it. So I think social media has played a role in unlocking some of the fear and shame, and the younger generation is also helping with that movement. But for kind of my generation, post-menopause, my parents' generation, that's definitely a generation or generations that just simply didn't talk about it. It was taboo. And so I'm trying to break that taboo.
And is that the intention? Just be like so bold and in your face about it that
Kind of.
we get
Yeah.
used to it?
Yeah. Yeah. And the vagina coach piece came a little bit later. So originally I was working with pregnant women and new moms, and because that was the phase of life where I started to become very aware of pelvic health. And I thought, well, most people who are learning about pelvic health are now well post-menopause into their 70s, 80s. And that's why people also think it's an older person problem. And
Yeah.
really, these problems are happening much earlier in life, even to people who've never been pregnant. But I was witnessing this happening to myself. And I thought, well, we need to tell people about the pelvic floor before pregnancy and childbirth, or at least during. So that's where I initially started. And I was trained as a doula and a personal trainer. So I was known as the fitness doula at the time. And then that was several years, many years working in that realm. And then I started my own kind of menopause transition, and there more and more people were coming to me in that phase of life. And doula didn't resonate quite so much, and I knew I needed to kind of broaden the scope. And and just kind of thinking about what I could do. Lots of the good names were taken, and then one day I was presenting at a conference for women entrepreneurs. And my talk was how optimizing your pelvic health can make you a better mompreneur. So this was a group of women who are moms and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I came up on stage. All the other speakers were some sort of a business coach. And I joked when I came on stage that you now have a vagina coach for your business. And that was sort of the light bulb moment where I said, okay, I'm going to step into this word that nobody likes to say. We always have to whisper it and give it code names, which I do. I use some slang terms in there as well, because it's a heavy topic. We need to lighten it up a little, but we also need to talk openly about proper anatomical terminology. So yeah.
Well, I know myself, after my fourth child, I dealt with a prolapse uterus. And obviously, that's a really extreme case. But I also grew up around women who would pee when they laughed, pee when they sneezed, joked about getting on a trampoline. And it was just sort of my expectation that after I had children, that was just completely normal. And that was how it was supposed to be. And I've since also had conversations with women who haven't had any children and also pee when they sneeze or they laugh. And why do you think we've come to accept this as just it's normal and it's just kind of how it is?
Yeah, that's just been the narrative. We also have lots of media outlets who say that light bladder leakage is just part of being a woman. And so we
Yeah.
are We are constantly fed messages that it's normal. I hear daily that women have been dismissed by care providers, both male and female care providers, that that's what happens as you age. What did you expect after you have babies? That's just what happens because you're now post menopause. And to your point where you say, you had a prolapse uterus and that's an extreme case, actually it's not. The prolapse is more common than incontinence. 83% of women at 6 weeks postpartum, whether they gave birth vaginally or cesarean, have some degree of prolapse, and 50% of that group have a stage 2 or greater. And that's could be the bladder, could be the uterus, could be the rectum, could be all three. Statistically, 50% of women who have given birth have some degree of prolapse. Statistically, with incontinence, it's about 30 to 40%. Now, I do think that that statistic should be a little bit higher because a lot of cases aren't reported. But it's not an extreme. It's actually very, very common and more common than incontinence to experience pelvic organ prolapse. And sometimes organ prolapse will mask incontinence. So when women have a bulge, which is an organ prolapse is where the bladder, the uterus, or the rectum either bulge into or descend into the vagina, and the bulge takes up space and can apply pressure against the urethra, which can play the role of some of what our muscles would be doing. So then when people have a prolapse repair surgically, or maybe they start using a pessary, then all of a sudden they're like, but I'm leaking urine now. So the leakage was there, but it was masked by the incontinence. So there's a lot of nuance with pelvic floor, and it goes so much, it's way more than just leaking. It's also way more than just go home and do 300 kegels a day.
Do you think it's a design flaw in our human bodies, or are we just not doing something that we're supposed to be doing to prevent it from why do you think it's so
I don't
prevalent?
think it's a design flaw. I think that we are just simply not educated. And when you look at the most common contributing factors to pelvic floor dysfunction, there are many things in our modern day lifestyle that set us up for challenges. So, a big one is constipation.
Yeah.
Constipation is very well established as a major contributor to pelvic floor dysfunction. Constipation is rampant in many people's lives. Doesn't matter the age, it certainly increases. I see as people get older, it increases during the perimenopause transition because we have some thyroid influence, hormonal influence. It's the processed food, it's the lack of movement. We have a lot of women who stop exercising because of their pelvic floor. We have evidence to show close to 1 in 2 women stop either because they're afraid of making their situation worse, or they have been told to stop because you can't do this with incontinence or prolapse. So sedentary lifestyle is going to set you up for constipation. Some pelvic floor dysfunction will contribute to constipation. So we kind of get into this big, chicken and the egg scenario. Dehydration is another one. We are afraid to drink water. We are limiting our fluid intake when we're afraid of leaking, when we have strong urges. So that's another component. We don't move as much. And when we do move, we're trying to make up for the fact that we don't move as much. So we have to choose the hardest, most intense activity. And
Yeah.
if we don't have the pelvic floor resilience capacity to manage the loads of those activities, we are now seeing Olympic weightlifting, CrossFit runners having increased uh, prevalence of certain types of pelvic floor dysfunction as well. So I think it's a modern day lifestyle. It's sedentary life. It's the foods that we're eating. It's the lack of awareness. We simply aren't told this information. So I don't think it is a design flaw. It's a lack of education and awareness and body literacy.
Like, if you were to explain to someone what is pelvic health.
So the pelvic floor is a group of muscles. There's also a huge blood supply, a lot of nerves, ligaments, tendons, just like the rest of our body. The pelvic floor has multiple layers of muscles. It's not just one muscle. It closes off the base of the pelvis, this group of muscles. So if you were to even landmark right now, put your fingers on your pubic joint at the front. And if
Yeah.
you are standing or sitting, if you pull the flesh of your butt cheek away, you'll feel the bones in your bum. Those are your ischial tuberosities. And then at the
Yep.
base of your spine, at the very tip of our sacrum, we have our tailbone or our coccyx. So the pubic joint, the coccyx, the two sit bones are where the pelvic floor muscles attach. They close off the opening of the pelvis. And there's three layers. So primarily, the first layer is primarily responsible for sexual response. Second layer, primarily responsible for managing the openings of the urethra, the vagina, the anus. Third layer, primarily responsible for organ support. The attachments on the base of our spine and our pelvis mean that it plays a role in our pelvic and spinal control and stability. So it's the foundation of our core. We've all heard of core exercise, but
Yeah.
have you ever heard of the pelvic floor being part of that core? It also works in synergy with our diaphragm. So when we take a breath in, ideally what happens in the sort of inner core system is the belly expands, the pelvic floor expands and lengthens. And then when we exhale, the pelvic floor contracts and lifts, the belly naturally draws inwards and it expels the stale air. So that sump pump relationship helps with circulation, moving things throughout the body as well. But things like posture, fear, uh, digestive troubles, all sorts of other things can interfere with that synergy. And so pelvic health is ensuring the optimal function of that group of muscles and its relationship as part of the inner core, but it's also tissue integrity. So we have the muscular side, we also have the tissue side. And that is, I would say, most prevalent in the postpartum period and also post menopause, where we have the hormonal influence of low estrogen. And postpartum, we will climb back up again and get back into our regular cycle. Post menopause, we reach that decline and we are forever in that decline. And so we need to have some tissue support in there as well.
So it's not just because we pee when we laugh. I mean,
It is so much more than that. It is back pain. 95% of women with low back pain have some form of pelvic floor dysfunction. We can
can you
look at,
talk ab
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
We can look at links to osteoporosis. We can look at walking speed, fall reduction, like risk of fall reduction. There's so many things that the pelvic floor plays a role in that, again, we have, first of all, never been told about the pelvic floor. It's not a group of muscles we can see.
Yeah.
We don't know how to access them. We don't know that there are specialists called pelvic floor physical therapists who are trained in this group of muscles and who can help us. And so often, statistically, we see about a 6.5 to 7 year window of suffering before women go to get help. And then when they go get help, they go to a family doctor and they're either put on overactive bladder medication or sent to a specialist for surgery. And I don't want to discount that those are great options for some people and at some point. However, all of the diet, lifestyle, all the exercise, all the components we've been talking about, like constipation, dehydration, posture, activity level, need to be assessed first and see a pelvic floor physical therapist as your first line of defense, because so often you don't need surgery and drugs and they miss the root causes. So there's a lot of recurrence with surgeries. There's a lot of medications that don't work because there just simply isn't that root cause investigation about why do you have this problem in the first place.
I'd imagine that's why you created the Buff Muff Method. I wanna get into that in a second, but besides the physical toll, there must be an emotional and mental toll that it
Mm-hmm.
takes as
Mm-hmm.
well.
1000%. And I would say that toll is greatest with prolapse. I don't want to say that there is no toll with incontinence, but we have sort of, we see the ads and we see the women giggling like, oh yeah, I can't jump out on trampoline anymore, haha. And we can put a pad in and we kind of carry on. And it's a
Yeah.
nuisance, but we just put up with it. With prolapse, all of a sudden it's very uncomfortable. It's a very vulnerable feeling. People feel afraid to move. They're afraid to have sex. They're afraid to talk with their partner. They're afraid to commit to social activities. So they become very isolated in their life and very sedentary. And there's a huge emotional toll there. I would say the loss of connection with a partner for people who are in partnered relationships, the lack of social interaction. There's a lot of women, even with incontinence, who will stop participating in certain activities or stop committing, especially later in the day, because they aren't sure if they are going to have a good symptom day or a bad symptom day. There's people who, again, who have stopped exercise. There's a socialization piece of that as well. There's also the mental component of benefits of exercise that they are now missing out on as well. And then if they need to miss work, if they need to miss activities with their children, their families, it's a huge toll.
Ooh, okay, let's get into the Buff Muff Method. How did you come up with that, and how does it work, and how does it help?
So when I was, again, I started out with pregnant women and new moms, and what I was witnessing was birth is a physical event. And being a personal trainer, I help people train for life. I help people train for events. And I was looking at birth being like a marathon. People always say birth is like a marathon. I argue it's like 6 or 7 marathons. So why are we not training for it? So that was my first program, was prepare to push. How can we optimize the body specifically for the demands of the event of birth? What are the most favorable birth positions? How can we train the pelvic floor to respond appropriately in those positions? And then any part of any training program would have a recovery plan in place. And in North America, we are sprinting back to the gym and wanting to not look pregnant as fast as possible, because now all of a sudden it's shameful. We've embraced this growing belly for 9 months, and then when we give birth, now we can't have any evidence of ever being pregnant. And that to me is, we're overlooking the need to recover. And it's honored in so many different cultures around the world. So my second business was a company called Bellies Inc. And we wanted to optimize postpartum recovery and take influence from other cultures around the world who really honor that first 40 days. There's rest, there's recovery, there's retraining. We developed and manufactured our own postpartum recovery wrap around the pelvis to help provide some support to the body while we rebuild the internal support. And then, so that's kind of where it started, was applying fitness principles to the pelvic floor. And again, then it was, I started going through perimenopause, and there was this whole other perimenopause, postmenopause, aging population that were like, this isn't just do your Kegels in pregnancy and now we don't have to think about the pelvic floor anymore. This is our whole lifespan. So
Yep.
let's apply the fitness principles to this group of muscles. And originally I had designed a program called Kegel Mojo, because most people are familiar with the term Kegel, and it was kind of like an expansion on that. And then I created a 28-day challenge, and my on social media I was often saying, "Who wants to come and buff your muff?" And everybody just really loved that term. So I ended up changing the program name to the Buff Muff, the Buff Muff philosophy, or the Buff Muff method. Really, it's a whole body holistic approach where we are applying fitness principles, but also lifestyle guidance, so that people understand it isn't just about Kegels. And often, the limiting factor of Kegels is people are told to do 300 of them, do them at every red light, do them while you brush your teeth, do them while you're sitting watching TV. Well, most of the symptoms we're struggling with happen when we are upright and moving and lifting and exercising. So we're missing that element of training the pelvic floor dynamically, which is a big part of what I do.
Well, it's interesting because I run these groups where our focus is primarily weight loss, but in all the healthiest ways. And I'm thinking like your pelvic health would absolutely factor in to you
Thousand
trying to
percent.
show up and doing all the things that you need to do, and trying to move the dial on the scale. Can you talk a little bit about how, or make it relate to our members, how important it is to address your pelvic health, even just for the sake of weight loss? I know that might sound a little weird, but I can sort of
No,
see how this
it's
fits.
not at all. As I said, it's so linked to so many things. And if we're struggling with our pelvic health, the intensity to which we can exercise may be hindered.
Mhm.
The Either the choice of exercising or not may be hindered. So, or the choice of, I know I can't do that exercise because I leak during that exercise. And it when people get their pelvic health optimized, when they build capacity and strength and endurance and resilience and learn how to relax their pelvic floor, which also sounds weird to people, all of a sudden they can exercise more intensely, they can lift heavier, they can run faster longer, they can run without symptoms, they can run without the aches and pains, because that's our core. The pelvic floor is the foundation of our core, and that is how we transfer loads throughout the body through all the different movements that we do. When it's not working optimally, all the other things we do are not going to be done as efficiently, as effectively as it could be. So it it is a missing link. To me, it's one of the greatest uh, obstacles for our longevity is the pelvic floor.
Mm.
It's what halts us from doing so many things that help us age well and age powerfully.
It almost is the base of our core,
It's the foundation of the core, thousand
the
percent.
foundation.
So, people doing exercise, people, especially from a weight loss perspective, it's often there's a body recomposition, but amidst the midsection is a part that a weight, especially in women, show up. it shows up in the midsection a lot. And that's a place. So they think they want to do targeted exercise. They think they need to strengthen their core. They need to do all these core exercises to flatten their midsection. Maybe like that, there's an element of that, of truth to that. But when the pelvic floor is part of that, when we've incorporated, when we learn how to harness the power of the pelvic floor, so many women in the group say, my back pain's gone, my midsection is flatter, I've lost X number of pounds, because they can now do more and do it more effectively and do it more efficiently.
I think when people think of core exercise, they think like Pilates.
Mhm.
How would you describe?
Pilates was one of the first exercise modalities that actually talked about the pelvic floor. So I would say they're
Mhm.
sort of one of the OGs in terms of incorporating that into movement. It's not the end all be all. It's great. I love it. But I'm also supportive of diversity of movement. I'm also supportive of heavier loading than what Pilates typically offers. So do it, but I wouldn't make that your sole exercise choice. I would make sure that you also complement it with some heavier resistance training, but you need to progressively load. So if you pay attention to the conversation of menopause, which is hard not to these days, it's out there, thankfully.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
everybody's talking about you have to do impact, you have to do heavy, you have to lift heavy, you have to jump, you have to run, you have to, no, not run so much, but load your joints and your bones. And yes, I 100% agree, but we can't just start and then just pick up the heaviest weight we possibly can and do it. We have to, like any fitness principle, progressively load. We have to do that with the pelvic floor as well. So the um, the influence of Pilates is beneficial. It wouldn't be the only choice that I would recommend.
What other types of exercise? How was it given the time frame? Again, I know it's so individual depending on what issues people are dealing with, but how long would it take me to buff my muff?
So it can depend on what you're struggling with. If you come in and you're struggling with leaking, so you leak
Mhm.
with exertion, let's say stress urinary incontinence, so you laugh, cough, sneeze, jump, exercise, little bits of urine is leaking out. Most people, I would say historically in my program, about 2 weeks to notice some change.
Oh,
I will
wow.
say at that 2 week, it doesn't mean that at that 2 week mark, or say they carry on for the full 28-day challenge that I have, that doesn't mean, like, again, oh, I'm done. I cured it. I never have to think of my pelvic floor again. It's just like brushing your teeth. We don't stop brushing and flossing when the dentist says you don't have any cavities. We have a maintenance program, and Buff Muff exercises are your brushing and your flossing, and you go see your pelvic floor physical therapist once a year, just like you go see your dentist once a year. If you're struggling with something like pelvic organ prolapse, it can depend on the type, it can depend on the stage. If you've caught it early, especially bladder and uterine prolapse, people can improve it by a stage. Some people can even reverse that. And that's usually kind of a 2 to 3 month time frame.
Okay.
Rectoceles are a little bit more challenging. Not as many people. It's not one that is typically reversed, but you can potentially make some improvements there. So with urgency, with waking at night to pee, those can happen very quickly within like a week to 2 weeks, again, depending on the reasons why you have that issue in the first place.
Oh, okay. You mentioned earlier relaxing versus strengthening. Is like do we have a tight pelvis? Is it the loose pelvis? What are we doing with it?
We, just like any other muscle group in the body, we need a balance between tension or length and strength. And with the pelvic floor, many people who leak or have pelvic organ prolapse or feel like they have to go to the bathroom all the time, or they have lack of sensation with sexual activity, they interpret that as weak, and they
Yeah.
interpret weakness as laxity. And that can be true, but tight is also weak. If we have tight muscles, they don't have, it doesn't allow for good blood flow circulation. It doesn't have the muscle going through its range of motion. It doesn't have its full range of motion to develop power. It's fatigued. It can't react at the right time with the right amount of force to close the openings off in the case of a laugh, cough, sneeze, or what have you. So we need to lengthen in order to strengthen. And often the lengthening can be what unlocks the strength component. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't do strengthening. A lot of people are told if they have a tight pelvic floor, never to do Kegels or never to do any pelvic floor muscle training.
Yeah.
There's newer literature coming out which is supporting my bias, which tight is weak, tight needs to be strengthened, but first we need to lengthen. We need to unlock the kind of get the length back, get the blood flow, get the circulation, but we also need to take the muscle through its range of motion. Maybe not as many repetitions as somebody who's not dealing with that issue initially, but we still need to have that activation component in there, even if it's to a lesser degree. There's some research that was looking at people who were dealing with dyspareunia, which is painful sex, which is often correlated with tightness. And they, when doing a max contraction, it elicited a greater relaxation response. So rather than just saying, oh no, just focus on relax, relax, just relax, 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 that can sometimes not be as helpful as we really think it could be. So when we insert periodically some max contraction, and then we get a better relaxation response, we're unlocking that stuck pattern, and it can sometimes move people to the point of freedom better than just thinking about relaxing, relaxing, relaxing.
So I know you can go to a pelvic physiotherapist, and they can actually get in there
Mhm.
and release those muscles. And you have exercises that help people be able to do this on their own.
Correct. I do recommend everybody see a pelvic floor physiotherapist once a year, even if you have no symptoms. I think it's the most underused women's health resource that we have. And if we can screen for these things before they become major issues, I feel like that's setting us up for success. So even if you have no symptoms, even if you've never given birth, even if you you know everything seems fine and you're strong, I still recommend that you go because they can play a screening role. They can use manual therapy. They can assess your posture, they can assess your breath, they can see if what are some of the contributing reasons. Maybe scar tissue is a contributing reason why you are dealing with some challenges and help you with that. Then send you home with some exercises or some maybe you would use a device like a pelvic wand to help release tension on your own at home. So that's my recommendation. Not everybody has access financially, not everybody has
Yeah, of
access geographically, and
course.
so my program comes into, it's never going to replace manual therapy, but it is going to provide a ton of education and body literacy for people and the tools to help them. It empowers them to take control themselves. It's also complements what you, if you do see a pelvic floor physiotherapist, they're going to send you home with a lot of what I talk about. So this is a way for you to come in and get that support. And there's a community aspect where people feel very isolated and alone in this journey. They feel like they're the only ones. They're afraid to talk about it. And when they come in and they come onto the coaching calls and they realize there's hundreds of women just like them and they can learn from the questions that others are asking, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I'd imagine so, to feel like you're not alone. I have a couple questions left. I'm thinking about myself. I'm going through menopause,
Mhm.
obviously, and I've had my own issues that I've been through, and I'm just thinking back if I could just have gone back 10 years,
Yeah.
and come across a program like yours, how would it be different, and what would the intention be for a woman who doesn't have any issues versus a woman who's in menopause and noticing more issues?
Yeah, so menopause can definitely be a trigger, but that's not to say that people can't experience these issues. Teenagers can experience these issues. Women who've never given birth can experience these issues. So the most common population that comes into the program are the people that already have a problem and they're looking for a solution. Not as
Yeah.
many people are taking action to prevent. It is my
Hmm.
hope that eventually that's the norm and more people do that. But more people are coming in around that phase of life. And part of it is because many of them have been suffering for years. They've been putting up with bothersome symptoms. They may have had surgery. They may have tried medication. They may have tried Kegels. Nothing really worked. And now they're feeling pretty defeated because all the things they've tried are not helpful. Then
Yep.
they get to their menopause, and now they have the influence of this hormonal transition as well, and they're in that low estrogen state. Estrogen is really, really key for the strength, the suppleness, the tissue integrity in our pelvis and our vulva and our vagina, around our bladder. And a lot of symptoms that they may have already been struggling are exacerbated once they now add that hormonal piece. So there's something called genitourinary syndrome of menopause. So we have the overriding menopause. That's the one day we have 12 consecutive months without a period. Now we are postmenopause for the rest of our life. Genitourinary syndrome of menopause is a sort of a little subset within the menopause umbrella of the genital, sexual, and urinary symptoms that are associated with that low estrogen state. So urinary urgency, urinary frequency, increased risk of UTIs, stress urinary incontinence, pelvic organ prolapse, painful sex, tearing, burning, itchiness. Like these are all incredibly, incredibly common. And the gold standard is vaginal estrogen. We know what's happened because of the Women's Health Initiative and how much fear there is around estrogen. So there's people who are maybe offered vaginal estrogen. I would say not enough people are, but when they are offered, they don't take it because they're afraid of what they've heard on the internet, or they read the label, which is not medically accurate. There's a whole petition around trying to change the labeling in vaginal estrogen to be medically accurate because it currently is not. So there's a lot of people who are offered that therapy who don't use it because they're afraid.
Yeah.
I argue, like, people think it's dangerous. There's loads of research to show the safety and the efficacy, and I argue it's dangerous not to be taking vaginal estrogen. Urinary symptoms like UTIs are incredibly common and can become septic. And women, it becomes life threatening, which sounds very dramatic, but it's true, and it affects our quality of life. So all of the other principles apply. Plus, we can now support the tissue with vaginal estrogen as well. And a recent research study looked at a group of women dealing with GSM, vulvovaginal atrophy was the older terminology. And one group did just Kegel exercises to increase blood flow and circulation, and the other did Kegels with vaginal estrogen, and they were using estriol as the form of estrogen. And the group that combined the two together favored better than the other. And part of the speculation is that the activation and relaxation of the muscles, increasing the blood flow, is helping the delivery of that estrogen when we're using it. So all the same principles apply to that population. I argue it's even more important because we are now at much greater risk of bone loss. We are losing muscle mass, sarcopenia, as we age. There's a group of muscles in the pelvic floor that are not immune to that loss of muscle. We have type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers in the pelvic floor, just like the rest of the body. Type 1 muscle fibers are sort of our endurance fibers. Type 2 are the quick contract, relax. We lose more type 2 muscle fibers post menopause. So that ability to react quickly isn't, we don't have the same ability. So we need to train our whole body and our pelvic floor for quick power, quick reaction activities, again, so we can stop the leaking when we laugh or cough or sneeze, but also so if we stumble or trip, we can catch ourselves and we can react quickly. We need that pelvic floor to be to be resilient, to have good capacity so that we then can do what we need to build our muscle, to build our bones, to age powerfully and offset all of the other risks we have as we are aging.
Yeah, it's your worth showing up and putting the work in and the time in. It's something you're gonna have to work at. I would imagine that your community, just after this conversation with you today, is a safe space to get informed and feel supported. What would you say to a woman who's just feels like she's on her own with this, either doesn't have someone to talk about with, or is nervous to talk to her doctor, or just doesn't want to say anything about it? What would you say to them if they're listening right now?
Well, of course, I'm going to say come and join our community, because in there you are going to learn how to talk to your doctor, what questions to ask, how
Mhm.
to advocate for yourself, maybe even understand your root causes and fix them on your own. So you don't need to, again, I'm still going to say go see your pelvic floor physical therapist, but you don't,
Yeah.
we have relied so much on doctors being the end all be all. And I think allopathic doctors are great for trauma, for emergencies, when we need to have surgery, when we need pharmaceuticals. But there are so many other opportunities for us to take this into our own hands when we have the right information. And the other point I want to make is that this does not have to be another thing. Like some women are like, oh my God, it's just another thing on my to do list because we have a big
Yeah.
one in this phase of life. The way that I approach this is, first of all, you should be doing some sort of exercise in a day. We should be working out because that's very well established to help with age related muscle loss, to help our bones, to help our brains, to help our hearts. We should be exercising. We incorporate our pelvic floor into whole body workouts. So you are building your brains, building your bones, building your heart, and doing all the things. And it's 10 to 15 minutes a day. It's not like an extra 1 hour workout that you have to try to slot in.
On that note, what do you wish more women believed about their bodies?
The capacity for change and healing without somebody, without relying on the on a diagnosis and that they need a pill for their ill. I think a lot of people come in and they think there's going to be some magic gadget or some magic pill or something that's going to cure their situation. They think they need to outsource the problem. I wish they appreciated that when they are in control, when they have the information, when they do the work and show up for themselves for that 10 to 15 minutes a day, huge change can happen. And the body is very adaptable to change when it has the right inputs. We just need to know what those right inputs are.
I know our members listening are going to feel informed and more empowered after listening to you today. I know they're going to want to reach out and find you. Where can they reach out? Where can they find you? Where can they follow you?
Thank you for having me in for helping get the awareness of this conversation out. My website is vaginacoach.com. I have a book called Your Pelvic Floor, which is also, some people like to start by reading something. It's in most major bookstores. On Amazon you can find that as well. And that's something that when you buy that, pay it forward and give it to somebody else to read as well.
Yeah.
And again, you mentioned my podcast, Between Two Lips. That's a great place to go and get free advice from myself and all the amazing guests that I have. And there's guests on there that you wouldn't think. I've had sleep apnea, blood sugar. Like there's so many other things that influence our pelvic floor health that you don't think about. So that's a really, I would say there's lots of rich conversation happening over there as well.
Love it. And I adore you. Thank you so much,
Thank
honestly,
you.
for taking the time to share with us today. Go check out Kim Vopni, the vagina coach. Vagina, 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 vagina. Let's say vagina. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Kim. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.